If I were to have a mission, I would say it would be to start bringing awareness to the unaware. If this is a simulation and this is a matrix, then we need to start thinking like it and then think in the terms of experiences. So how many of us and how many of our parents are repeating the same cycle over and over and over again and not deviating? And if the purpose is experience, what new experience are you gaining? I would look at it from that.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Sam Dever Podcast, episode 144. In this episode, I speak to Will Pounder. This was an incredible conversation, to say the least. To watch this episode, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@thesamdeverpodcast. To listen to this podcast, be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. To check out our sponsor, Produce Your Passion, go to produceyourpassion.com. Here's my conversation with Will. Will Pounder, welcome to the Sam Dever Podcast.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, man, I know this has been a long time coming. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. And our pre-conversation, before we even started recording, I'm like, my mind's already blown talking to you. It's like you have an agenda of what topics we might cover, but then we start talking Nephilim and theories of Jesus. And it's like, oh, wow, we can go 1,000 different ways with this conversation.
Yeah, the Nephilim actually, if you actually study the text that lead into it, it almost looks like it's propaganda. So it's like they made it up to try and prevent the Anunnaki beings from mating with the humans. As a type of a thing. There was a whole according to the text, there was a big war going on between this being called Ea Enki and his brother Enlil. So how this actually pertains to nowadays is the direct quotes from Enlil and his son Amun-Ra are basically the god of the Bible, or monotheism. That's where the origin point of monotheism comes from. So that's why you say amen at the end of a prayer. And then it's also why in monotheism, they changed the name of Jesus from Yahshua to Jesus, because there's no J in Hebrew. So if you take the J away, it's Isis, and Isis means Hail Zeus in Greek. And then that translates to Hail Enlil back in Sumerian. So you can see the whole side on that. And so then you look at the Ea Enki side. So he was according to the text, he was the master geneticist. And I believe that the earth was actually named after Ea Enki. And so he put high vibrational DNA in mankind, which made it so that mankind could essentially transcend their own species. So an interesting thought that this has is when I'm kind of talking to people about this, I was asking them, I was like, if you were to create something, or whether it was having a kid or create a creation or something like that, would you want to create it lesser than, equal, or greater than you?
Greater than me.
That's, everybody says that, right? So then that's what Ea Enki did. He created mankind. He didn't create mankind. He genetically modified mankind to be greater than themselves. And then when his brother found out, Enlil, he saw that as abomination and sought to just subjugate, and et cetera, et cetera. But that's the God of the Bible. So if that's the case, then why would the God of the Bible create a being that is lesser than and demanding worship? So that's it's a paradox. It's a weird loop. Sorry, my brain just thinks
Have you seen
crazy.
the movie Prometheus?
Yeah.
One of my favorite sci-fi scenes is that beginning scene where the engineer, whatever he was taking, that's what reminded me what you just said. He takes that thing to dissolve into the water to spread the DNA code or whatever it is, and then the evolution starts. That's what it kind of reminds me of.
Well, so here's some weird stuff. So we know, so modern technologies actually confer, lining up with these Sumerian texts. When the stories were first interpreted, they were kind of pretty far out there. It's it honestly kind of sounds like a bunch of bullshit. However, now that modern science is advancing, it needs a second look at. So, for example, in these tablets, there's the talks that we live in a binary star system, that we have two stars or two suns. And also that when you look up in the night sky, you're not seeing the Milky Way, you're actually seeing the dwarf Sagittarius galaxy. So that's actually what we're seeing. So we thought it was a Milky Way. Turns out we're actually absorbing a dwarf Sagittarius galaxy. And then they just discovered a brown dwarf star outside of Pluto. So we're actually in a binary star system. So like weird things that shouldn't line up. Like if one thing lined up, cool, but that's two things that lined up. And the third one's also pretty weird too. So our our advancements in genetics has found that in humans in chromosome number 2, there was a leap that was too great for evolution. And it was dated to that change happened about 250,000 years ago, which is the same timeline as when all the stories happened in the Sumerian tablets. So those also line up. So you got three very interesting pieces of information that talked about in these old stone tablets that are just bullshit stories, but now modern science is starting to kind of line up with it. And so there might be more correlation to this ancient history stuff than we thought. Like, have you seen the photo of they took a photo of 2 quantum entangled protons?
No, I haven't.
So they took a photo, you should look that up, but it literally looks like yin and yang. Like it is yin and
The
yang.
exact
The
symbol.
exact, like you have the loop thing with the hole in one and the hole in the other, like the exact yin and yang. That is a quantum entangled proton.
And I have to go back to, so you're saying that genetic leap, that would explain someone putting that genetic code?
Well, so when, so basically there were, according to the text, like Ea Enki didn't just create mankind. They used the Homo sapien or whatever the humanoid was then, and then put their own DNA in them in order to essentially create a workforce. And so like we were programmed to be basically a slave species. That was the original story of it. So the reason for this is it was the Igigi, which was basically the common working class of the Anunnaki beings. So you got the Anunnaki, which were the governors. You have Anun, who was like the president of their world, and that his sons was Ea Enki and Enlil. Ea Enki's son was Thoth, and then Enlil's son was Amun-Ra. So monotheism was Enlil and Amun-Ra, and they wanted to subjugate and control mankind. Ea Enki and his son Thoth wanted to help raise mankind up, and so Thoth and Amun-Ra were always getting into fights, bickering or whatever, and so Thoth was instructed to establish civilization across the rest of the world. So you follow through all Mesoamerica, you see the same mathematics of the pyramids in Egypt all the way through. And then it gets even more weird because there's this book called The Matrix of Power, which follows the symbology of, there's this guy who studied secret societies for like 25 years and followed the control of power of that from Egypt all the way to modern day America. So like, that's what he calls it, that modern day America is the new Egypt, which is pretty interesting, but yeah.
So now it's already.
You're gonna have to like hone it in because there's so much so Egypt, information. Yeah.
Do you think people built those pyramids, or were those built by extraterrestrial beings, or some type of technology that we can't even fathom?
So the easiest way to really deduce this is if our technology, as we move through time, gets better, then that's an anomaly, because the technology of construction of the megalithic structures gets better the farther back you go in time. It actually degrades as you move forward.
Interesting.
So that implies that there was a higher level of technology, whatever it was, and then as we move forward, we started losing it. And so I always make the argument that the greater the level of technology, the lower the impact it has on the environment. So that's might be why there's not a whole lot of evidence, but there are some archaeological outliers out there. For example, there's a 2 billion year old nuclear reactor in West Africa that was discovered. What? And so when that entered the science field, it was only in the news for like 2 weeks, because the archaeologist was like, this confirms a theory that nuclear fusion can happen in nature. But then when nuclear physicists got a hold of the article, they rebutted it by saying that the isotope to create a nuclear reaction cannot occur in nature, and in the infinitesimal small possibility it could, there's no water pure enough to maintain the reaction, therefore it was made by humans. And so the problem with this is that it's not carbon dating. Carbon dating is not accurate, but the most accurate way of dating that we know of, at least as far as I'm aware of, is nuclear halving. And with it being a nuclear, fission, you can test it. So it dates back to 2 billion years old. So why is it there? It shouldn't be there. And then another really weird science-y thing that also lines up with these Sumerian tablets stories that are pretty far out there. Because like when you're talking about something that is like billions years old, what's going to survive that time? And most of it actually centers around nuclear energy. And so the actual history of the universe, according to these texts, talks about there was, and it's a wild story. So like, if you subscribe to it, great. If you don't, great. It's like no one really knows. We're talking about billions of years ago, and so it's like, but it's entertaining. It's good bar talk, But so basically, it was like the Pleiades star system, also known as like the Seven Sisters. There was this big galactic war, and also, by the way, George Lucas got the idea of Star Wars through these ancient stories, because the warriors at the time were pronounced Dejeti. The war that they had this technology. It was basically the Death Star. It was called like the Barahama or something like this. It's hard to pronounce it, but as close as I can get. But according to the text, is it could kill one man on 3 worlds or blow up entire worlds. And so this war in the Pleiades star system was allegedly started over race, and then when they started blowing up planets, the debris started crashing into other planets. So the space-faring species kind of fled from the Pleiades system and then went to Orion's belt, and then the Earth was actually, what the theory is, that Earth was actually a refugee planet. So whether it's true or not, we don't really know, but there's a lot of out-of-place archaeological artifacts found in actually ancient Sumer, which was right before Egypt. But if you kind of go down deep into the soil, they found some pretty weird stuff that really, it's out of place. So it kind of, maybe that could happen in there. Maybe it's not. Maybe there's different perspectives not taken into account. But it's pretty interesting slow events. But this is where I'm going at, because it gets interesting, because then it talks about a war that happened in this solar system. So there was a war between a planet called Tiamat and Mars. So we know what Mars is, and so, but we don't, where's Tiamat? So some astrologists hypothesize that we should have another planet in our solar system, yet we don't, but we do have what's called the Kepler belt. So they believe that the Kepler belt was actually another planet. And so according to the tablets or the stories, the Tiamat got blown up and Mars got nuked. Well, here's the curveball. So there's an isotope, it's like xenon 22 or X22 or something like that. I always get the name of it wrong, but it's something 22.
I've heard of that one, yeah.
It's, as far as human consciousness is aware of, it is only found after a nuclear explosion. There's no other way to create it, as far as we've discovered. It's on Mars, it's tests at 200 times the levels found anywhere on Earth, implying that it was basically nuked. So that's pretty interesting. Another interesting thing, when you start going back into like the ancient history, if you look at Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, their ancient history kind of hints at like flying saucers, spaceships, and nuclear war type of thing. Yeah, I guess like when two big cities or empires were going to war, the rulers fled to the stars on their ships, and they nuked each other. Now, I know it sounds far out, because, we're talking about nukes, and this is, the ancient history. So I think it was Gaia sent a bunch of scientists out to go test the soils around that time frame, and they found the xenon 22 isotope, which maybe something else caused it. I don't know, but that's an isotope only found after nuclear explosion, which lines up with their ancient history. So it's just one of those weird anomaly things that doesn't really make sense.
Have you heard, I've heard a theory when they, the 2 nuclear bombings that have come within the last 100 years, Nagasaki, Hiroshima, that's when UFO sightings shortly after started to happen. And I had heard, that's crazy that you said that, because they said that they saw that what we were doing, and like, we better go down there and check in on it.
More specifically, the sightings were on longitudes north and south, right? I believe.
Is it Eric, do you know?
Yeah,
longitudes north and south. So the longitude line from where the bombs went off to Antarctica is where the majority of the sightings were at. It's really bizarre. So then when you get that information, then you start looking into Antarctica, and there's a whole other,
like Admiral Byrd. Yeah.
So I met Admiral Byrd's neighbor.
Get out of here.
Yeah,
no way.
In an acting class.
No way.
Yeah. And so I was like, so I started asking her, I was
his neighbor.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was talking to her. I was like, okay, like, give me the 411. Like, what's
Yeah.
what's he like? And she's just like, I don't know, he just seemed like a military dude, nothing crazy. And I was like, huh, I was in the Marine Corps, so like I get it. But when you look at Admiral Byrd's interviews, he didn't come off as like a nutter. He came off as like, this is a good place for young adventurers to go and explore. We need to get here before the Russians do to control the resources. Like it was all strategy to him about that. And then weirdly, all the developed nations basically banned it. Operation High Jump was never declassified. He went out there with the whole fleet and got his ass kicked in like 2 weeks and came back. And then everybody joined together and basically banned anybody from going to certain areas out there. It was really bizarre.
And from there, I've heard I've heard hollow earth theory. I've heard at the North and South poles that there's we're going to go really deep. Agartha is like another world inside the earth. And that, at the two poles is where the UFO ships go and they fly in. And they said there's like woolly mammoths down there and like all this crazy stuff.
Whole bunch. Yeah. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. Like,
it's fun to think about.
It's interesting. But if you also go back in time, every ancient civilization has stories about these aliens that live underneath the water or underneath the earth. And so it's, why are those there? For example, like, like the picture of like the ET or like the Greys, what they call them now, but the original ET. If you take that photo to like the natives, they refer to that as those are the ant people. So according to their history that was passed down, the ant people are the ones that brought them under the ground to save them from the flood, but they're also told not to mess with them because they'll kill you. So it was like, it's like, why do they even have that story? Oh, you want to know a really crazy one?
Yeah.
Okay, so this one's bizarre. Like all of them are pretty bizarre.
This is just the warm up. This is going to be legit.
There. So look up when you get bored or you want to go down like a rabbit hole and you'll be like, what the fuck? Look up the Dogon tribe in Africa.
Huh.
So there's still sticks and stones to this day. And in the 70s, I even looked at this documentary just because I was like, I can't believe that. So I had to actually look it up to see it because maybe this is probably all bullshit. But no, there's a documentary where this philanthropist went down to the Dogon tribe in the 70s and videotaped them and talked to them about who taught them their way of life. They talked about it was these beings that comes from one of the 3 moons of Sirius, and that's who taught them their everything, their culture, et cetera, et cetera. And so the problem with this is this was in the 70s. There wasn't and I'm going to get the dates wrong, so you can Google them, but it wasn't until like 1986 where they had a telescope to find the 2nd moon. It was like 1993 where they had a telescope to find the 3rd moon. And when they found I might get the years wrong on that, but after they found the 3rd moon, they matched up the astrological formation of the 3 moons of Sirius with the Dogon tribe's artwork of it, and it was a 99.998% match, which statistically it's impossible without even knowing. So that's just like this huge, like, what the fuck? And then the other thing is there was a researcher that noticed a mathematical pattern in their artwork. And this is where it gets really interesting because we didn't even discover this till like the recent history. And so after he kind of found the pattern, the mathematical pattern, turns out it was an error correcting code that's used by advanced software, Yahoo, Google, et cetera, but it's also found in the fabric of reality and quantum mechanics. It's an error correcting code. So aka simulation theory is basically what it's pointing at. So mind you, everything points to simulation theory. All the discoveries in quantum physics and everything points to simulation theory. So, but the question is like, how does this tribe know or even have record of any program? And it's just the artwork that was passed down from them. So how do they have information to the star cluster with a 99% accuracy? And why do they have artwork that represents an error correcting code, which now they call it the Endinker codes, because of the Dogon tribe? So those are just some 2 really weird anomalies.
And they would have no outside influence whatsoever.
Zero.
This is obviously the 70s where there's no Google, there's no...
Correct. And there's sticks and stones.
What's simulation theory?
So simulation theory is that our reality is essentially a simulation.
Kind of like the Matrix then?
Yes. me personally, I believe that we live in a simulation, like wholeheartedly. Another example is discovering quantum theory is that you can experience the effect before the cause. And so stating that is really a profound statement, because that is the law of attraction in and of itself. Let's kind of like break it down a little bit. So you have right now in our reality, you have cause and effect, and everything else is the randomness of nature. And that's what we all kind of accept. Well, what we're finding in quantum mechanics is that you can experience an effect before the cause. So they cause a chain reaction, and at the end of the reaction, the effect happens before the chain is finished happening. And so, because time moves forward and backwards. But remember how we always say that space and time is not real? So we're going to get into some it's going to, like, a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their head around this. For me, it makes sense. So I'm going to try and break it down.
Yeah,
really
no,
simple.
please do.
So if you can experience the effect before the cause, and if we are quantum entangled with ourselves, so when they break down, like there's aspects in our cells that have quantum entangled properties. Same thing with our brain. They believe our brain is a transmitter and a receiver. So we might store memories in our brain, but they also think operates more like an IP address, where we're storing information almost like a cloud. And I know it sounds crazy, but like, go look at it. That's kind of where that science is going in that direction. So there's quantum entanglement there. So now let's also look at what reality actually is. So the past isn't real, and the future's not real. So the past is all information that's stored, and the future is all quantitative predicting. So that's essentially it. So the future isn't set, it's quantitative predicting. So what decides which path we go? So what's the only thing that's real is actually the present moment. So the present moment, there is no time. So when we're talking about quantum mechanics, that's why it moves backwards and forths, because there's no past, there's no future. It's just bands of wavelengths. So a way to kind of break this down to understand how things exist inside band of wavelengths is, if we deduce reality into the two smallest components, you have an electromagnetic wave and consciousness, according to the theories on this. So in order to actually really break this down further, we have to actually understand, well, what is the purpose of consciousness? So, because we already know what electromagnetic waves are, but so consciousness, that actually is what affects it. So when light is being perceived, it changes from a particle into a wavelength. So it literally propagates. And so what this means is, when you add in the fact that the speed of light is the maximum speed of this reality, that's almost like the buffering speed for this reality. We're kind of looking at it from inward looking outward, according to the theory. So if we have, and then we also have what's called the concept of density. So if everything's a wavelength, we experience our reality on bandwidths of wavelengths. So for example, mind you, what we experience of reality is less than 1% of the total light spectrum. Just taking that into consideration. So like, we're in this small little aspect of where consciousness can exist, is in this like less than 1%. And then you have the concept of density. So if I were to take a wheel and put it on this desk and spin it really, really fast, you're first going to hear every audible sound you can hear. And then if you spin it faster, you're then going to see every color that you can see. Then you spin it faster, it becomes invisible. Then you spin it faster, you can move your hand through it as if it doesn't exist, because from our density perspective, it's potential energy. But from its density perspective to us, it's still a wheel that's spinning, but it's now in a different dimension or a different density. So realities exist in bandwidths of densities. And so, does it make sense so far?
Yeah, I just have to interject real quick.
Yeah.
So when we're saying simulation theory, is it the theory someone is controlling this? Because I'm wondering how free will and all that come into play. I don't want to derail you, but
So I wouldn't say it's someone's controlling, but imagine because by asking that question, you're also asking, well, what is the purpose? Essentially, is what it is.
Is there a puppeteer? Is there a creator?
So
creating this?
Here's kind of how this this is how I would actually look at it. So if this is a simulation, then let's look at a Minecraft room. So you ever play Minecraft?
I know of it. I didn't
Okay.
really play. Yeah.
So people can create different worlds on Minecraft, right? And then you can go into and experience the world that somebody created.
Sure.
So that's Minecraft. well, how does that break down in this reality? Because we've all heard of like soulmates and all this kind of stuff, right? Um, well, let's say you made friends with someone or another consciousness and you decided you want to enter this matrix to experience it with that person or those people. So you interact with each other and you're like, I know you. I don't know how I know, but I've known you. Well, we must be soulmates type thing, whether it's friends or romantically. You come down here and you experience it together, but that was decided, like that was, I think, according to the theory, that was decided before you came here. Just like if you wanted to go jump into a world with your friends and go play a game of Halo or Call of Duty or whatever, like you get together in the lobby, you go in and play it. But in this reality, we forget when we're born. So what's really interesting about this, that was actually mentioned in the tablets. So in Lil, I'm going to go back to that story because like there's so much information and it all intersects. So this is why I've been studying this for like 20 years, just trying to get it to make sense in my head.
And it reminds me of I've heard of soul contracts, like where in Mr. Nobody, that's a good movie. That's where like basically the concept, all these babies are in a waiting room and it's like you're going down, but you're going to forget everything once you start to be able to speak. So that's where you said that was in the tablets.
So in Lil, so this actually has to do with the Tower of Babel and in Lil. So the humans started building the Tower of Babel. And so according to the Bible's version of it was an atrocity to God. We're building a tower to reach the heavens. God comes back and then makes it so everybody speaks in tongues, and then the tower ends up falling apart. That was the story. And so no one really ever questions that as to like, well, what is speaking in tongues like? So let's, instead of look at it from God's perspective, let's look at it from the Anunnaki stories perspective, where it actually originated from. And so let's say Enlil comes back and sees that mankind is advancing in technology a lot faster than he would have liked. Because remember, Inky put high vibrational DNA in us, and we just started going. So what happened after the Tower of Babel is in the text, Enlil says that mankind shall live no longer than 120 and then be made to forget. And so that was in there. And so that time that's 250,000 years ago, according to these texts, which lines up when our chromosome number 2 was also kind of edited. Now, if you go back into the tablets that talk about the Tower of Babel, how do you make people no longer to speak in tongues? What if it was actually to speak with tongues? Because when you follow the text that came after that, the Anunnaki were surprised at the humans' desire to name everything. So why would you be surprised? Like, naming things is normal, but if you communicate telepathically, you wouldn't have to name it. It was just, you can just send the image and just like a zip file, and you know it. So that's like one of the theories, if you're following this conspiracy theory about it, is that mankind, Enki created mankind to be very powerful. And if you reference the stories of the legends of Adapa, you'll kind of start to understand that a bit. So Enlil saw that as a threat, deleted the connectivity, limited so that mankind will live to 120, so that once mankind starts to figure it all out, they'll forget and then be reborn and recycle and over again. So
that's what I was going to get to. So are we thinking people have souls and there's reincarnation? What's the theory on?
So that's reincarnation. There's so much, some of the greatest discoveries in Egypt. I remember it was like 10, 15 years ago, there was a kid that he was talking like he was just off the battlefield of World War II. Just so happened his battle buddy was in the VA hospital, and I think it was on national news, and they reunited them, and the little kid picked up as if it was the next day on the battlefield with this older war vet that was in the VA hospital. One of the big discoveries in Egypt was this lady who remembered a past life, and she spent like 30 or 40 years just trying to get to Egypt. And when she got there with the archaeologist, she said, no, this is the gardens, this is this building, this is this. And so when they started digging in those areas, they found it exactly how she said. So it's really like there's so many, like when you start looking at all of that data, it's almost irrefutable at that point that past lives are a thing. So if past lives are a thing and simulation theory is a thing, it's starting to kind of make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, it ties together.
So now what you're asking is about the soul. So the spirit experiences things through the construct of the soul, the same way that the consciousness experiences things through the construct of the body. So it's a data collection mission. So your soul or your spirit is sitting above time that we are experiencing. It's above the matrix and it's collecting the data. So this is where the multiverse is. But when we think of a multiverse, we often think about like this world, this world, this world, this world, almost like lobbies. But we need to change the shifting into it's just bandwidths of frequencies. So these frequencies sometimes will intersect. So multiple timelines can actually come together and then separate, because it's not separate worlds like separate lobbies of a video game. It's all bandwidths of frequencies. So this actually comes into play with quantum mechanics and the quantum computer. So you might have heard this one. So that with the quantum computer that they had, they gave it a problem that would have taken it like hundreds of years to solve. Like it would have been impossible for it to solve it in a short amount of time, but yet it solved that equation in like 33 or 36 minutes. And it baffled the scientists because it was literally impossible for it to do that. And the only way that they theorized that it was able to solve that is that it was the same quantum computer in multiple universes solved the equation at the same time, because in the quantum world, space and time is not the same. The laws are completely different. So when you look at time being the present moment, it's all bandwidths of frequencies happening that the higher consciousness is pulling it in on data. So therefore, if we look at consciousness, what is the purpose of consciousness? We can all agree that it's to expand and to grow, right? Well, how does that do it? It does it by experience. So what is manifesting? Manifesting needs to be looked at through the lens of experience. You're writing a code to do something. So if you say, I want a car, I want a house, you're going to manifest the experience of wanting something, therefore the lack of it. But if you manifest the experience of having something, especially if you use emotions, because emotions actually affect those fields. And so back to that first experiment where they experience the effect before the cause, they're hypothesizing that this is what draws a musician to becoming a musician and artist to become an artist, et cetera, is that it's their quantum entangled future self, but the future is not real, that pulls them in that direction. Well, what is the law of attraction? You need to believe and feel that you are in this lifeline. And so as we move time through quantitative predicting, your awareness is shifting that pathway. So when you start to do this, you can see the little synchronicities that start to line that up.
And you mentioned the 1% that we're perceiving, and that made me think of, whether someone has a psychedelic experience or meditation or whatever it is, is that what they're meaning? Like you're opening more doors of perception, if you will, like you're able to see more, or the DMT and the laser, the code.
Oh, yeah.
So there's like stuff going around like all the time, but we can't, in our normal selves, can't perceive it.
Well, so we have the data. It's all there. So the pineal gland is processing that data, but where something's going on like with our brains. And I think it was when you go back, we were genetically engineered. So like if this is a simulation and we are coders, and so we're transmitters and receivers. So what is manifestation? It's what manifestation is literally writing a code. And so what is the code? It's your intention being pushed into the matrix and then that going. So if that is actually how this world works, then we're going to detour just for a second.
Yeah.
So let's look at like Gnosticism real quick. So Roman Catholicism came in and basically killed all the belief systems. It was one of the biggest atrocities in human history that we just kind of overlook because, well, that's monotheism. It's okay. They were non-believers, so we got rid of them. What they talked about, from the paganism to the Gnosticism, all of their beliefs, the different names that they had for their different gods, were actually just the Anunnaki beings from the Sumerian stories. So Ea, Enki, Enlil, and then you had all of their generals, their family, their et cetera. They're all these people on that. It's also why the translations in the Bible are kind of wrong with stuff, because Elohim is plural for gods, not singular, but they used it in the Bible as a singular, but that doesn't, you can tell it's not the original transcript. Plus the discovery of Gobekli Tepe, which we'll get into in a minute.
Well, you already got me thinking about the Library of Alexandria.
Yeah,
that
so
burned down.
that's
So I'm sure a lot of this was in there.
yeah. So they actually a lot of people hypothesize that it's actually in the Vatican, and I had a friend go there down to the basement, and they wouldn't let her go any further. But she recognized some stuff on the table that they had. They had like apparently she said they just had a bunch of crap out on, well, not crap, but old stuff on the tables, and she saw some stuff that she believed that was actually lost in the Library of Alexandria in there. So I was like, it would make sense if they were to take that because that structure from the Vatican also traces all the way back to the Roman Catholicism, basically, who wiped out all the old belief systems. So if you're going to basically wipe out all the belief systems, you need to get rid of any artifact that references that, or it becomes a problem. For example, Gobekli Tepe. It's starting to become a problem for mainstream religion, and so. Have you heard about Gobekli
Oh yeah,
Tepe?
yeah. Doesn't Graham Hancock talk about them
Mm-hmm.
a lot? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I was just in Turkey. Literally, I just got back from Turkey like yesterday. I'm still a little bit jet lagged, so that's why my brain's like
You seem
not
pretty
quite there.
sharp to me.
But so after the discovery of Pillar 34 and Gobekli Tepe, the Turkish government has banned further excavation of it for another 150 years.
What's Pillar 34? Just so I.
Pillar 34, essentially, all of Gobekli Tepe, especially Pillar 34, references the Book of Enoch. So the Book of Enoch, so the Enoch is a very interesting character just in general because he's mentioned in Genesis, but he's like, he's walked beside God, essentially is what it was. And he got took into the heavens. So he's like one of two people who did not die like every other human on there. So for something that seems pretty great, why is his book taken out of the Bible? It doesn't make any sense. But I'll get into that in a second because I researched that. But anyhow, but it's still in the Ethiopian Bible. But the Book of Enoch talks about the genetic manipulation to get mankind, where they use different beasts to try and do it. Like, so you came up with these intelligent beasts and all this kind of stuff. Like, maybe sounds outlandish, but basically a bunch of genetic experiments and a whole bunch of stuff. So they took it out of the Bible. But with Pillar 34 is saying is it's referencing the Book of Enoch. So if the Book of Enoch's true, then we're going to have to go revisit all the other books that they took out of the Bible. And that paints a completely different story. Like that is the Anunnaki story. When you start really getting into all of those books, though, that starts to break down even there. So that starts to raise more questions than it does answers. And so so the other thing with Gobekli Tepe is it was intentionally buried 600 years before the Great Flood. It's really bizarre. So the archaeologists tried saying this is a primitive species, but yet they have like 3D artwork in their construction, and they have like irrigation and a whole bunch of it was a city, and it's the largest megalithic structure ever discovered, and it's the oldest. It moves human history back like 6,000 years from what we are aware of. So it's like it's an anomaly that shouldn't exist, but yet it does. And the information that's coming out of it is pointing in the direction that the Catholics tried to completely wipe off the face of the earth. So if that actually starts to breadcrumb its way back in, it could be a big problem for the institutions that control the world. And if you actually want to follow it, so I went to Rome to go see it. So I went all over Italy, and if you go to all the ancient castles, almost every single one has a Freemasonry symbol in it somewhere. And it might not be at the front. It might be on a floor tile in the back or hidden there, or it could be pretty rubbed down because you might not even recognize it. But there's Freemasonry symbology all over it. And so when you get to Rome, let's just hypothetically say this for a second. What if Rome never actually fell? So whenever you're the number one at something, you always have a target on your back, right? America's number one. We've got a target on our back from Russia and China, and who knows anybody else that wants to assume the title of number one. So anytime you're number one, you always have a target on your back. So Constantine was saying like, well, what is the next phase of Rome? So they started that. He had a meeting with that and created Constantinople. And instead of becoming the physical city to control things, he tested the governance, which was the church, the political system, and the monetary system. And so that became modern day Istanbul. And so after that, that structure of power that they created there became the mechanisms that's been governing the world, been the church, the monetary system, and the political system. That makes sense?
It's all connected. I mean, it's all
Yeah.
So Rome was what, 1,000 years Rome lasted before it fell? Something
I
like
don't
that.
know. I don't know how long it actually
Something
was.
like that. What did I'm getting off topic, but it says like certain things like Rome was showcasing like certain things we're showcasing now.
Yeah.
Like so just
Oh yeah.
as far as fall of civilization.
I'm not gonna go there, but yeah, there's I got yeah.
So have you ever seen a really random example, the new Planet of the Apes that's out?
The newer one.
Yeah, so it's the brand new one. It was based on the newer trilogy that was like 10 years ago with James Franco, but they came out with, so it's 300 years later.
Okay.
No spoiler alerts, but a lot of what you're talking about in these examples remind me of what happens in that movie, because you had Sea Moose, the monkey who James Franco raised, who
Yeah.
was like led the charge and started this civilization. But 300 years, you don't think it's a lot of time, and then it's not. But they showed how construed a message can get when what this group thinks it's this, when this group thinks it's that, and it shows what happens. Two completely different viewpoints, because the facts get lost in translation. So when you're bringing up like the Roman Catholics, like we got to wipe it all out. This is the message. But when people start finding information, and it's like, that doesn't make sense due to this new information we just got, people start to panic.
You want to know a really weird coincidence? We'll call it a coincidence.
Okay.
Maybe not even a conspiracy. We'll call it a coincidence. So when we went to the Middle East for war, like when America went there to war, that was 2 weeks after the discovery of the tomb of Gilgamesh. So that was really bizarre, because the locals there were saying that the military is doing these digging operations at night at the same location that Gilgamesh's tomb was supposedly discovered. So what's very interesting about this is, have you heard of Gilgamesh?
No.
So Gilgamesh is the story of Moses.
Huh.
That's where it comes from. Like you'll find that the majority of the stories of the Bible are either the same or a reiteration with little variances from the Sumerian stories. They had to get them from somewhere.
Like the virgin births and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've heard that's been told over multiple.
Yeah. So like all these stories go way back. You also got to remember that when a lot of these books were written, most people were illiterate. So it's like, so it's anyhow. So Gilgamesh was, according to these texts, the last Anunnaki human hybrid. So if they found his body and they genetically tested it, it would rewrite the entire power structure. So everything that monotheism came in to basically erase the old gods, do all this is where you come from, that would be genetic evidence, like hard evidence that no, we actually came from that way, if that makes sense.
It'd shatter everything.
It would shatter everything. Yeah. So what is Gobekli Tepe doing? It is hinting at the same thing. That's why they're banning further excavations on it for another 150 years.
Really random. Same universe we're talking. So what's the deal with this spaceship they say that's coming in November? Have you seen that? What they're talking?
So I've heard about that. And so there's some interesting, okay. So I don't know anything about that, but I do know there are some old, I'll tell you the story. So remember how like before we started the show, I was telling you about the Amun-Ra and like how he was the prescribed owner of this planet. So by the way, so if you're just tuning in or whatever, so Enlil and Amun-Ra is the God of the Bible. The direct quotes from the Sumerian texts from them are the direct quotes that are of God of the Bible. So pretty weird, or not. And so Amun-Ra owned the planet, but Amun-Ra and Enlil were not really good to mankind. Like we're the equivalent of lab rats to them. So they're also quoted that we're being noisy, and so they try to reduce our population and all this kind of stuff. But anyhow, so Amun-Ra owned the planet. Well, the humans revolted, and we actually ended up winning the war. And so when we won the war, Amun-Ra, his guard, which was pronounced Ra Shield, or the Shield of Ra, got him off the planet. And so when they got him off the planet, he gave ownership of this planet to Ra Shield. Now, if you follow that down, that becomes Rothschild. And then the Rothschilds become the Rockefellers. And then what do the Rothschilds own? They own the vast majority of everything on this planet, which essentially that's what Amun-Ra owned. So now this boils down into bloodlines. So you know what? The farther we go back in history, they're always about bloodlines, especially royalty and stuff like this. So here's something that gets really interesting. So there's this thing called the Sumerian Kings List. It's in Cambridge. You can actually go and look at it. And so the Billy Carson and his research team traced the bloodlines of the King's List. And what the King's List is, it's got the names of the Anunnaki rulers, the Anunnaki human hybrid rulers who lived for less time, and then the human rulers who lived for like 30, 40 years. So you have thousands of years that they lived for, then, hundreds of years, and then like normal human years. So they couldn't equate it to a writing of time. It's just one of those bizarre things. But that bloodline traces all the way down to King James of England. Well, this is very interesting. So King James is the center point of a lot of things. So not only that, there was also a girl and her father made national news, I think a couple years ago, because they traced every single president except for Trump and one other president to King James. So essentially, if this Anunnaki story is real and mankind was created to be a slave race to basically harvest the minerals or gold or whatever the story was, then the same bloodline that has been in charge of mankind from the beginning is still the same bloodline that's in charge of mankind today. It's pretty bizarre.
Bizarre, but makes sense at the same time.
Kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
So now let's look at King James, because there's a lot of things that about King James that most people don't know, even though they worship the Bible that was essentially the King James version has been deemed the most accurate version of it. But King James has heavy Masonic ties. And most people that have read the Bible don't know anything about King James. So like I would encourage to go look at the person who deemed that these are the ones that are worthy of reading, not these other ones that tell a different story.
So he handpicked, like, this is what
supposedly
you need to know. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple curveballs, and this curveball has to do with Shakespeare, and you're not going to see this one coming. So, so King James put together that version of the Bible. Well, most people don't know that King James also wrote the book on witchcraft.
Whoa.
Yeah, right? So what is witchcraft? Like, I'm not talking like, cutting fucking rats' heads, foots, all that kind of stuff. Right. Like that's the telephone game. What witchcraft is how do you teach, let's say you learned how to manifest, right? You learned how to write code in this matrix and you want to share it with the people so that they can write the code of experiences for their higher self to have, right? So how are you going to teach that? You're going to teach that through visuals. So you're going to start teaching people that, and through the telephone game, now you're going to end up with all these crazy rituals and all this bullshit that doesn't do anything. Because if this is a simulation, then it's a code that writes it. Words don't write it. It's the intention that actually writes it. So the intended doesn't know the difference between Spanish, English, Italian, or Tagalog. It just knows the intention. And you can also, they did a water test with this kind of too. That's a story for another time. Let's get back on topic. So let's look at Shakespeare. So Shakespeare was a very interesting person because it has more to do with an organization and less to do with the person. So Shakespeare might have just been an organization and not a person, because the researchers who study Shakespeare realize that there are two very distinct writing styles that one person typically would not have. But let's look at something that's a little bit more concrete than just than that. So in his sonnets, these researchers discovered, and you can look this up, like there's a documentary called it's a Shakespeare documentary on this, like who was Shakespeare. So they discovered a secret code in his sonnets. Well, what was interesting is there's a CIA agent in the 70s that developed a code to transmit secure information on an open channel. And so that code was discovered in Shakespeare's sonnets. So after they were done with their research, they brought the CIA agent in to review their work, and he passed ownership of him creating that code to Shakespeare. Pretty weird, right? That's really bizarre, right?
Especially coming from the acting community.
It's very bizarre.
Yeah.
So Shakespeare that code actually leads to a location of a saint. And I'm going to spoil the documentary a bit, but I encourage you to go watch
Spoiler
it.
alert. Yeah.
So when they went in there, they wanted to, so every saint has a casket, and inside the top of the casket, they have like a little box area where they have like a pennant or something like that in it. And so that's with all of the saints. And so they wanted to X-ray that casket. Well, that specific saint's church has armed guards. It's more heavily guarded than fucking Fort Knox. It's really bizarre. Why is the church so heavily guarded, for one? So what they did is they held a charity concert in the chapel, or in the church of it. And during that concert, they turned all the lights out at one point, and then they had a X-ray machine and they scanned it, and then they went on with the concert. So they got the information, they got out, and they didn't get caught. Well, what they found is that entire casket has a false top, or the entire tomb has a false top, not just one chamber, but the entire top thing is an open chamber. So what is stored in there, because that's what his sonnets are pointing at, using that code that was first originally invented by the CIA agent in the 70s, but now it's actually Shakespeare. So they actually believe that Shakespeare was actually the person that was the one that put the Bible together. And because he's tied to Freemasonry, to the same people that King James was tied to.
Whoa. I have not heard that one. What do you mean by, what'd you call it, false tops?
Yeah. So
what do you mean by that?
So instead of having a chamber for a pendant,
Yeah,
the entire top is a chamber that can hold more than a pendant. It could hold books, papers, who knows what's in there. Will we ever know? I don't know.
so is it like decoys? Like we're supposed to think it's one thing when in reality it's something completely different?
Well, everyone's supposed to think that saint only has a little chamber for a pendant, and it has a false top, and it's
Gotcha.
heavily guarded, and they didn't want to let anybody in there to go X-ray it. But they figured out a way to get in there and X-ray it anyways. So that's all in the documentary. So all the stuff that I'm talking for, this is like stuff that I've researched. I've either heard it from people who've been studying it for like 20 plus years, or I heard it from a documentary, or et cetera, et cetera. I'm just reiterating stuff that I've been studying for like 20 years.
So what happened to King James? Because he, at one point, he was the king of what? Of England. It got thrown out at some point, because that's how it would go when people would overtake it. So like so what happened? Did his family get overtaken by another one? And like, did he just happen to lose all this grip that he had on like apparently everything? Like, how's that shake out?
Well, I didn't really study the history of that. I just studied the correlation between him and the Bible of it.
Gotcha.
And that was he's the center point of that. He's the center point of the Sumerian kings list, where that traces down into King James, and it's the center point from when the modern people, the modern rulers, genetically all tied. That's the center point.
Now, do you think that's people like
Probably a coincidence.
a coincidence? Well, or I mean, do you think it's more of just like their bloodline kind of just manifesting what they're meant to be? Or do you think there's actually like someone kind of like placing these guys in these positions to become presidents and kings and stuff like that?
Well, that's actually an interesting question of putting people in there. I would say that if you had this is actually just the laws for civilization to succeed, is you need a governing class and you need a working class.
Yeah.
So if the governing class understands that this is a matrix, which that's believed that was information that was taken away from the people, then you'd want to put people in power to teach the masses the exact opposite, to teach them that, you have to work your way up to be able to do these things, instead of it's your innate gift.
That's really interesting bringing that up, because like it does make you think, because when you hear, oh, the Rothschilds rule everything, and people are like, oh, you conspiracy theorists, but like when you break it down like how you're breaking it down, it actually starts to actually make sense. Like it makes even more logical sense, because there's like an explanation for it. It's not just like the powers that be, but it's like, no, they understand like how this thing works.
Wouldn't you, I would suspect that at least one person along this line would spill the beans at some point, Yeah.
Maybe they did.
Maybe they did. But like, I don't know, you just feel like there would be more of it coming out, or they being exposed, or with technology.
Well,
I don't know.
Let's look nowadays. What happens to the people that are exposing the system? Man, Epstein, man, dude, don't
You get
think he made it.
canceled.
You get canceled, you get discredited, they'll kill you. They're putting it out there, and there are people that believe them. But there's so basically what you have is you have power and influence. Those are the two things that basically mold society. And when the influence starts to threaten the power gets rid of the influence. But right now, the influence fighting against the narrative, anytime it gets too big, they just take it out, or they use the story and they change it.
Well, I think you have influence and then you have worrying, like concern. That's kind of how I see it. So it's like, if you had an influence and I guess that could work because everyone else is just worried about like offending the influence. But I don't know. I just find it hard to believe because like we are all human, and a lot of people just be like, whether it's greed or just confusion or stupidity, I just feel like they would drop the ball somewhere, and I just find a hard time thinking that there's like a small group controlling everything. But I could subscribe behind like the bloodline thing.
I can tell you how a small group of people pushed wokeism on the entire world like that. And that just happened.
And now is that part of a control thing? Like,
yeah. So
no, please. Yeah.
So where did, so for example, we're going to fast forward to modern day times instead of history.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
So remember, it's a small group of people that control the masses. So let's look at a modern day example of this. So one day we're just along, everything's fine. And the next thing you know, this wokeism is getting shoved down our throats by everywhere we look. Every commercial, everything is getting pushed down our throats. So what changed? So there was, I'm going to get the letters wrong, but I'm just going to call it an SME rating. I don't think it's called that, but just for the sake of giving it a name, this is a rating given to companies that to make them a good investment for institutional money. So higher the rating, the better it is for institutional money. So they changed it so that you needed to take basically the whole woke agenda. You need to cater to that, or you're going to get a low SME rating. So what do companies have to do if they're on the stock? They got to do what's best for their investors. So what did Nike do? Nike's got a good SME rating. Well, let's look at Elon. Does Elon give a fuck about that? Not at all. He's got a low SME rating. So just like that, every company in the Fortune 500 turned around and started catering to the minority.
But what would be the incentive to make wokeism, to create it, I guess? Is like the powers to be, like what was the incentive behind that? Like why did they
need? It's a very good question. So there's a couple different theories on it. Now, I'm saying I'm subscribing to any of these because I don't want this to get twisted around and be like, but like it's good to try to educate on all boards of it.
It's a philosophical discussion.
Yeah, philosophical discussion. Yeah. So one of the theories is that, gosh, this actually goes back into this actually traces all the way back into where compounding interest comes into play. And that's actually a very dangerous path to go down. So I want to avoid that path. But essentially anytime someone starts to aggregate a large amount of wealth in a population, historically they would go to war to take it back. So how do I say this without using certain words? Because you mentioned this word or you're going to get labeled some bad stuff. So I'm trying to figure out how to communicate this on camera without doing that. Okay, so so compounding interest started in Egypt.
And what do you mean by that, compound interest?
So there was a group of people that introduced loans with compounding interest, and within a very short period of time they ended up owning the vast majority of assets. And then when the pharaohs saw that this small group of people is now owning their culture, they went to war and enslaved them and took their stuff back. Then you can follow that pattern through history as it spreads out across the rest of the world. So it used to start regionally, and let's just call this a game of chess. So you can see the game of chess being played in this country, this country, this country, and you can see how it destroyed their economies. And so they have banned compounding interest in their companies. Some even have it punishable by death. So then as the world becomes more interconnected, more controlled, and more centralized on the governance side of the house, you then have the game of chess, instead of being regions, starts to become countries. And the whole play from the countries is to become global. And so anytime you're moving wealth from one to another, you have to create a lot of chaos to get it out. Does that make sense?
Why? Why do you have to create chaos to get it out? Just
Well, because if everybody realizes that you're stealing all their stuff, they're going to take it back.
Distraction.
okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so they're going to
Okay.
have
Yeah.
That makes
big
sense. Yeah.
distraction.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing, if you mind you, this is like just from what I've seen on the pattern from where compound interest started and to how it's affected the countries as it's migrated around the world, and now it's a global game being played. And so, oh fuck it, might as well go here anyways. I'm a porn star. It's not like anybody's gonna believe me anyways.
I was just interjecting. Divide and conquer is so true. Like it's really what we're talking. Just divide the people. We're going to do what we want because they're too busy fighting.
So these would be different groups playing the same game. So it wouldn't just be like the Masons or like the Rockefellers controlling everybody. It's like different groups of influence that are playing this game of compounding interest with each other.
Yeah.
Right?
So when you go back to the actual puppeteers of the world, the only game that they play is for power. It's not even, they don't even care about money. It's the game of power. It's just a completely different way of thinking. So we're taught to think as money as you have this money, you go buy this. Like that's how we're taught. But how money should be taught is money is the denotion of someone else's energy, and it should be a river. So if you want to create money, you need to create a river. How do you create a river? You add value. Anytime you add value, there's money. What is money? It's, well, like for example, like this water, it costs $1. Well, someone's energy went into making the plastic and putting the water inside of this. So I'm not buying the water, I'm buying the energy that went into this. So if you change the terms of it, now you start to think of money differently, and you're more apt to be a creator of things than you are a consumer of things.
Oh, I love that. And I subscribe to that. I believe that money is kind of like an energy thing. And yeah, no, I love that.
Yeah, so just think of it from that way. But actually, so here's a fun one. So have you heard of the what is it? The Great Reset, the one world currency, that whole thing?
2030, right?
Yeah, but do you know where that came from? The origin point. So it first got labeled a conspiracy theory in 1986. So I'm going to get to the powers that are controlling this. So in 1986, the World Economic Forum. Now, do you know who the World Economic Forum is? The WEF. So the WEF is the like 0.001% of all wealth on the planet. That's the Rockefellers. That's the 13 families. That's the good old boys club, basically. That's the World Economic Forum. So mind you, like, to give you a perspective, if there's like 400 quadrillion dollars in the world, they own 300 quadrillion of it.
And that's not like your Bill Gates or Elon or
I
Warren
don't think
Buffett
Elon's tied into that, but if you want to know that,
The other guys.
I would go look into that.
Okay,
Like,
cool. Fair enough.
There's a lot of names I'm not going to say on this
Sure.
because I don't, you know.
No, and I'm just the ignorant. Like I literally have no idea. So
You just research
Okay.
the World Economic Forum. Their motto is, and this is public, you can look at their commercial, is you will own nothing and you'll be happy about it. Means that they want to own everything and you rent from them.
Well, I mean, just even here in LA, just the amount of apartments that are being built at full. It's like, yeah, they really don't want home ownership. It's like you're going to rent.
And the game that they play it's not a one generation game. It's a generational game. You change the up and coming generation. So that's why, remember when Elon said it's harder to change the education system than it is to land on Mars? He says like there was a reason behind that because that's how they're controlling the system. So anyhow, let's get back. So in 1986, the World Economic Forum proposed the Great Reset. However, not all countries in the G20 were in a financial crisis, so they didn't vote it in. And that's when the Great Reset became a conspiracy theory, was at the G20 summit. And you can look that up. So if you watch the G20 summit, I think it was last year or the year before that, they just voted yes in favor of the Great Reset. So the conspiracy that started in 1986, now it's not a conspiracy anymore. It's actually they're going to be implementing it.
So what does that mean it's going to happen in 2030 then?
You should look that up.
Oh,
It's really, there's a lot to it. That's its own
and
podcast.
it's public knowledge. It's
Yeah.
not like a hidden thing.
No, it's not. No, it's all public.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, shit, that's only 5 years away. Let's go. Let's see what this is about.
So I'll break it down very easy. So the easiest way to deduce what this means is, what is the world economics agenda? It's to own everything and you own nothing, right?
And you'll be happy about it.
And you'll be happy about it.
Yeah.
So that's their agenda. So how do you accomplish this agenda? Well, how do you end up owning everything that people already own? So it's not going to happen in one generation, right? So what you could do, let's just say they operate off of a currency. Now, what's the hot topic right now? It's cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
So let's say you operate off of a currency, and then the countries have their own currency. Because right now, what happens if the US prints too much money? We get inflation, but that also affects every other country around the world.
We saw that during COVID.
Yeah. So not only that, when we print money, we're actually stealing money, the value of money. We're not stealing money, we're stealing the value of money. So the value of money that we're stealing is also the World Economic Forum's money. Remember, so if they have $300 quadrillion of it, and out of the 400 quadrillion, there's just hypothetical numbers, but we just start printing more and more money, that means if we're owning, let's say they print 100 quadrillion, which they're not, but now the amount that theirs is worth way less.
Right, but all
You
the
see what I'm
money
saying?
that everybody else is getting, they're spending it on dumb
of
shit, and
course.
it's just going right back
It's
to
gonna
those
flow
guys
back
anyway.
up, but yeah,
right.
but they're diluting it, and it's not, it powers the hand. Now remember, these people there, it's a game of control. So what goes from one river goes into another river. Now this is going to sit above any type that we're going to build, but if you're able to build that kind of money, I'd love to be your friend. Just kidding. But anyhow, so the so how are they going to own everything? So if they operate off of this currency, and let's say each country has their own CBDC, and so if they print that CBDC, well, right now we're in a deflationary system, and the cryptocurrency, the way that they're trying to set it up is going to, we're in an inflationary system, and the cryptocurrency system that they're building is a deflationary system. So what happens if a country prints a bunch of their CBDC? Is this just going to increase the value of their token that sits above it? So how would you end up owning everything? So over the period of one generation to another, you would increase the inflation on one and then just buy all of the assets on it. And so you would just tip the scales of inflation back and forth between the generations, and you can end up owning absolutely everything and nobody's going to know it.
So you think they created crypto then?
I think whether they created it or they're using it as an opportunity.
Using it as an okay.
Then you hear about all these companies buying like farmland and
Yeah.
like you said, it is, you are correct. It is a chess game, and it's not an overnight thing. Like this has been calculated. They have a 100-year plan, a 200-year plan. Like,
so this all comes from, we deviated from the spaceship coming here.
yeah.
Remember? So the reason for that is because all of this has context to it. So with Amun-Ra, his ownership of this planet was when the last, so we moved, what was it? It was 2025 is when his ownership was over. And so supposedly it's a new Anunnaki being's ownership of this planet now, supposedly, according to the text, because it's like we went from, oh gosh, what's the star system? We just migrated from one star cluster area into another star cluster area. And so that signified like however many thousands of years. And so that would be the end of one era and the beginning of the next. And supposedly there's a translation. I haven't read it. I just heard it. So just take it for what it is, that Amun-Ra's ownership of the planet ends. And now it's supposedly another one of the Anunnaki beings has taken ownership. Well, remember, Amun-Ra no longer owns the planet. He passed ownership to the humans. So if that story is true, then that could be them just coming back to take ownership.
Whoa.
So here's an interesting thought. So like so Billy Carson and his research teams hypothesized that the Anunnaki are about 1 million years technologically more advanced than us. So why would they need to engineer mankind to do the labor versus just using AI and robots? Right? So a couple reasons. One, AI and robots takes a lot of energy, for one. And two, if you look at Microsoft's like brain, what is it called? Their brain tissue servers, they discovered that they learn fast. They can learn AI processes faster at a fraction of the energetic cost by using brain tissue.
Time out. You said brain tissue servers?
Yes.
They've developed that?
Yeah, like last year, a couple
Oh,
years ago.
wow.
What's interesting is, so like if they give AI like the game of Pong, they tell it to create the game of Pong. It takes AI a long time to figure out how to create it and play it. But when they use actual like brain tissue, then not only does it create the game, but it knows how to play it very quickly.
So we're getting into humanoids. Yeah.
So, well, here's another theory. Is like, this is the dreaming theory, that when we dream, we leave this planet. Because if they don't, so according to that brain tissue, in order to keep it there, they have to program that it is a flower or a butterfly floating in a field until they need it to do the processing for the servers. So it's really bizarre. So if that was the case and the Anunnaki are that much more advanced, why didn't they use robots? Well, okay, energy reasons, et cetera, et cetera. So, but what if they create mankind, teach them a civilization, how to do all this? What if that was actually the whole objective, to govern the civilization, guide it as it goes, to keep us to do what? Harvest the resources, try to make technological advancements when we can, but mostly for like the resources, so that when you come back around however many it says, every new cycle it comes around, to come and collect the resources. So let's fast forward. Let's say we're conquering the universe and we find a planet that has a lot of resources that we need. And according to the text, gold is something that is highly sought after. Why do humans have this desire to go after gold? Like the whole time, like everything's about gold. The gold standard, like Pharaoh's all about gold. Why is it gold? Unless if you're dealing with electronics and technology, it just looks cool. It's it. There's some other interesting properties when you convert gold into other things, but so it's all about gold and resource. So if that was the case, maybe it's just they're coming back for collection time. I don't know. I mean, like, what would you do in that situation? Say if you're a governing planet, you've got a planet full of stuff, your people don't want to go do the manual labor. So then you genetically modify a slave species to do it. Then you teach them how to run a society, and you make the currency based off of gold. And then when it comes time to harvest the gold, you convert them away from gold. And then when you come in to take it, you take it all, and then you leave the society there to continue to doing what they've been doing. It's interesting, but theory. So then let's look at genetics, because it's why. Have you heard of the worshiper gene? So the geneticists have found that humans have what's called a worshiping gene. And when that gene expression is turned on, then there's this deep desire to worship a god, a politician, a celebrity, et cetera, et cetera. When the gene expression is turned off, that desire goes away. So where did that come from? Like, that's not an evolutionary thing. Like, why would you evolve to worship something? That doesn't make any sense. So the only logical thing from my perspective as to why that gene exists is, well, if they engineered us, they would want us to listen to them. So that would make sense, right? Who we are has more to do with our genetics than really anything else. Like there's a book that talks about the hunter gene and the agrarian gene. So like the hunter gene, it's one of the most hunter genes are also typically O blood types. Not all of them, but most of them are actually O blood types. So the dopamine response is actually completely different in the brain. So the hunter gene are typically your go-getters. So like if someone that carries a hunter gene wins an award or something like this, they might, have a party or celebrate it, but ultimately it's probably going to end up in a box in the garage, and they're probably not going to think twice about it. So then they typically go out and chase another thing to get another dopamine response. So they're the go-getters that tend to keep going after stuff. So how else does this translate is, let's say they go through something traumatic. Typically they don't get PTSD because they're just like, well, probably shouldn't do that again. That just seems to be the mentality, but that's how the brain processes it. Like everything's different. They also have a hard time sitting still and weaving a basket. Like you could do it, it's not going to be fun. Modern day, hard time sitting in front of a computer. You can do it, not going to want to. But then you look at the agrarian gene. The agrarian gene, the dopamine response is completely different. They're the type of person that if they win an award, they could identify with that award. So anybody know anyone from high school who still lives in the glory days? I was captain of the football team, or, they're fucking 30, 40 years old and still talking about their high school days.
Or like what, Napoleon Dynamite, the Uncle Rico. Yeah.
So that's an agrarian trait. So if you go through something, if you have the agrarian gene and you go through something traumatic, you're more likely to develop PTSD and you'll identify with it. So it's completely different things. The agrigarian gene could sit there and weave a basket and be happy, or sit in front of a computer and work on a computer and be happy. So there's different, that your genetics also kind of is almost like a blueprint of who you are. And so as we start to have a deeper understanding of genetics, we're starting to have a deeper understanding of what makes us us. And so also fun simulation theory. So the pineal gland, right? So if this is a simulation, that means there has to be a higher consciousness guiding us, right? So you ever played like World of Warcraft or something like that? You know what it is?
Yeah, no, I never played that.
You ever played like any RPG
Yeah,
online?
a little bit. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So here's an interesting like thought experiment, right? So let's say I'm playing my character, right? So that character has a higher consciousness. It's me. And so I want to guide that character. I want to do what I think is best for the character. So I'm going to guide it through the world that it's in. So that character understands space and time. It covers X amount of space over X amount of time. But I know that it's not real. It's inside of the game, right? So as that character moves around the world, let's say interacts with the blacksmith. So the blacksmith is an NPC, non-player character, and he can have a conversation with the blacksmith, talk back. Blacksmith can send him on errands. He can repair things, buy him, sell him stuff, send him on quests, and do all the things. So from the perspective of the character, the blacksmith is a real person. But the blacksmith isn't being guided by a higher consciousness, right? So what is that in our reality? What's the parallel to that? So if the pineal gland is what connects us to our higher consciousness, then if the pineal gland then becomes calcified, to which the crystals no longer vibrate at, then you're no longer being guided by your higher self. So you're operating off of your baseline programming.
Because I really have been thinking, honestly, this is incredible, because it really makes you think of the world and why it works the way it works. And even if people know, haha, I figured it out, it's like, what are you going to do about it? You know what I mean? So when we're talking about whatever it is that is setting the stage for all of this, when they got stuff mapped out hundreds of years in advance and they have 3/4 of the resources, how are you ever going to overcome that? I mean, it would take massive, massive, massive revolution of some kind. And it
So
just,
everything happens in a sine wave over the scope of time. Everything oscillates. So as their power structure goes up, at some point it's going to come down and something else is going to replace it over the scope of time. Now, what's the window of time? We don't know, because we're here for such a small part of it. So what you're kind of actually looking at is like, well, what is a purpose? Because it's not like we're going to come in and come change that. So a lot of people that start to study this doom and gloom of control of in the
Sure.
world, like, oh, I feel hopeless, yada yada yada. I was like, well, your purpose in life isn't to dismantle this. This has been going on before you got here. It's going to continue to go on after you're here. And even if you were to dismantle it, it's only going to, whatever you replace it with is going to inevitably be dismantled later on. So let's just call that's part of the matrix. That's part of the experience. So trying to take some like ownership and responsibility for that's the ebb and flow of a civilization and control in general. You're not going to influence that. So instead, why not focus on what your purpose here is? So if the purpose here, because like it also boils down to what is the matrix? The matrix, if past lives are real and this is a simulation, then what is a purpose? The purpose is, as we mentioned before, it becomes experience. So why does your higher self want you to come here? It's to experience. Why are you coming into a place where you forget to learn and experience? I was like, it's such a really good question. Thank you. I'll pat myself on the back for it. So let's look at consciousness. So if consciousness always was and always will be, and it knows everything, but yet the purpose of consciousness is to grow, how does it continue to grow? I was like, well, the only way is for it to truly forget itself. And through the process of remembering, it gains contrast. So what has every ascended master in history told us? From Gandhi, Buddha, Jesus, Saint Germain, you pick them. They all have the same message before religion twists it around. And their message is to look inward and remember who you are. It's always been the same. And so there's a really good book called The Power of Now. And so we're going to get into, yeah, it's a good one. Yeah. So so I want to reference Gnosticism and The Power of Now. So in Gnosticism, they believe that mankind is lives in a false matrix so that one day mankind will wake up and see the web of lies fall apart and live in the real matrix. So what we do know from neuroscience and quantum mechanics is that our reality is the projection of our mind. We are creating the experience that we're living through. So when we observe a particle, it becomes the wave, and that's light. So if that is the case, then you're starting to see how this kind of changes a little bit.
It's like I have like 10,000 lasers going through my brain right now of like this conference. Yeah, it all connects. That's what's crazy about it. The whole thing connects.
So if the reality is the projection of our mind, then that means the prison of reality is in our mind as well. So that reverts us straight back to the telepathy tapes that we had talked about earlier, the non-speaking autistic kids and so on and so forth. So in our mind, just like the power of now, if we're in our mind, we only know the past or we know the future, but we cannot think about the present moment. It's impossible. Like right now, if you try and think about the present moment, what is it? Where is it at? It gets infinitely smaller and smaller and smaller, but you can't find where's the actual present moment because it's impossible for the mind to, it's just an impossible concept of the mind because the present moment is a state of consciousness. So when you shift from the state of the mind into the present moment, that's where all your magic abilities, that's the manifestation, that's clairvoyance, that's remote viewing, that's your astral projection, all those weird pseudoscience type shit, that's where that can happen at. And that's also why when people feel the most alive. And in the book, he says the colors seem brighter, things feel more real. And so this is also why a lot of people that do extreme sports like to do extreme sports because that's when they feel alive. Kind of makes sense, right? So just like in the book, how do you get into the present moment? Ask yourself, what is my next thought? And so that period of time where there's no thought, your conscious mind shifted from being in your mind into the present moment. Now, eventually you're going to start thinking again, and then it shifts back. But if you're ever able to like identify that little switch, and it's really subtle, and you're able to control that switch, you've essentially done exactly what all the spiritual gurus have been trying to tell you to. You've started on that journey. Another way that people start that journey is when you look inward, you realize that you can observe your thoughts. Well, interesting, because if you can observe your thoughts, then you are not your thoughts. And if you're not your thoughts, then who am I? So then you start going down the path of identifying higher self. Then you end up looking back. So we're going to kind of move forward because that's the beginning. So the next bit is actually the purpose of the ego. So most of us are taught like the ego's bad, like, get rid of the ego. It's like, well, the ego is not actually bad. The ego is supposed to be in support of the soul. But as you get older, the ego forgets itself. And so therefore it fights for survival. So when you look at kids, and right now almost all kids are under 24-hour surveillance all the time. And so there's this anomaly going on where kids are like, as they start to get to like 8 and 9, they're talking to they'll sneak into their younger siblings' rooms and be like, can you remind me what God looks like? I'm starting to forget. Whoa. Or they'll talk about like the windows of like, yeah, I chose the family in this window. And then when you look at the research done from regression therapists, this is an anomaly that's not just happening from 1 or 2. This is happening from regression therapists all around the world. And so maybe it's a crock of shit, take it for a grain of salt, because we can't prove any of this stuff. We're talking about stuff that's outside the scope of what we can measure and test. But the only thing we can look at is the mass amount of data that comes from it. And maybe there's something there. But what's coming from that is essentially like people are choosing their families because they're choosing the experiences that they're going to come have. So it's just a interesting thing, because if that's the case, then it also supports simulation theory, like the whole nine. We see how it all just interconnects. Everything seems to keep pointing in the same direction. But if you only study one area, you'll never see the pattern.
This right here, these phones, forget the power of now with these, because we are constantly distracted. And I've really been thinking deep of what you just said about to truly be present. There's always a little, you're right. There's always a little anticipation of the future, or you're still kind of lingering. When you're on your phone constantly and on social media and they're throwing like whatever the thing is that day, no one's present. Like it completely takes you over your mind, like completely.
There's a scale in the spiritual journey. So at the bottom of the totem pole is materialism. So people that are really into physical, like materialism. But the farther you go up, as you start going your spiritual journey, then you start reconnecting with self, higher self along that journey, the less that the physical things matter and the more that experiences actually matter. It's the people that you keep, the friendships that you build, the experiences that you go on carry more weight than the physical items and the houses and the cars that you end up getting. So like that's part of the spiritual journey.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Sam Dever podcast. I hope you're enjoying the show. I just wanted to take a quick minute to tell you about my new project called Produce Your Passion. Produce Your Passion is a creative platform for people to overcome obstacles and bring their visions to life and become their most authentic selves. We have a brand new website. It's produceyourpassion.com, and there you will find coaching services. You will find another podcast called Produce Your Passion. I wrote a book. You can download it for free, or you can get it on Amazon. We have an online store where you can get Produce Your Passion gear and a whole lot more. Check it out, produceyourpassion.com. Now, back to the podcast.
I went to Italy for 2 months, and that was probably the manifesting that happened on that trip was insane. It was absolutely insane. I manifested the entire trip. And so I'll give you a couple examples because like there's no way this was a coincidence. So like day one, I get into there and the Pope's getting voted in. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to go to Rome. I'm going to go away from Rome. So I'm in a small town called Lido di Ostia, and I'm before tourist season. So there's nothing going on. So I go to that quiet space, which I then learned that's the present moment, or it's you're not in the mind, you're in the present. So then I say, I'm going to party like I've never partied before. I'm on vacation. So that night I'm grabbing food at like the only place I found that they had burgers, and I was like, I need protein, I need something because I've been a carnivore and I want to gradually break it as I'm exploring the country. So I find a place with burgers, and as I'm leaving, I got recognized. So they wanted to do selfies and wanted to buy me a drink. Well, I don't typically drink, but another country, so I'm going to drink, partying. So yeah,
When in Rome, but not Rome.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So we ended up chit-chatting for a little bit. Then I go to leave again, and another group of people came in. They recognized me, and so they wanted to take photos as well. And so then the bar owner wanted to take photos and ask if he could post it. And I said, sure. Fast forward later, I'm now behind the bar, drinking and partying. There's a couple hundred people inside the place. They end up putting one of my porn scenes on a projector on the wall.
So you're just like the man of the hour.
It was the most wild party. And then we get shut down by the city. The bar gets shut down the next morning by the city. So I wake up to go to the bar, and they're having a petition. So I joined the petition to reopen the bar. So the next day, this is day number 2, I go into the quiet space and I say, I want a group of guys to take me to Rome, and I want to meet a really good chess player. I love playing chess. And so sure shit, that night, a group of guys come up to me. They're like, Will, we want to take you to Roma. Say you go. And I was like, fucking hey, let's go. So we go to Rome. And one of those guys I ended up becoming really good friends with. And so like we stayed in touch this whole time, and turns out he was Italy's #1 chess player. Can't make this up. And so we played chess. He whipped my ass so bad. Like it was the best ass whooping I ever got in chess, because I would sit there and I would focus like really hard to try and make the move. And I'm pretty good. Like I can hustle a lot of the street hustlers. And so he would like, oh, that's a good move. Yeah. And then he'd shut the whole thing down.
Checkmate.
And I was like, what the fuck? Like he was so unbelievably good at it. And so that was that experience. And then when it came to like finding, like I wanted a beige jacket that was light because I only brought a backpack. And so I'd say, I'm gonna go find this. And first store that I walk in, it's the only beige thing in the whole store. That's my size, that's beige. Just stuff like that happened the whole time with everything I wanted to get. But then, so I ended up going to Sardinia, and I realized I don't know enough Italian to survive. And it's not tourist season, so a lot of people out and about don't speak English. So I go to the quiet space and I say, I will find someone to teach me Italian. That night, I met a girl who was an English and an Italian teacher. So we would go out to dinner. I'd take care of dinner, and then she would teach me Italian for the next 2 weeks. We toured all around Sardinia, and I learned Italian enough to survive. Bizarre, right? So now let's fast forward. I end up going to Sicily, tour that, and then I end up in Napoli. So in Napoli, I go to the quiet space again. And this time I say, I want to go on an adventure. I want it to be something I would never expect, and I want it to be good. And that was it. So as I'm walking in, I'm there pretty early at like 8 in the morning. I can't check into the B&B till 3. All of a sudden I walk under this umbrella because I'm contemplating getting a pizza, and this rainstorm just comes out of nowhere, just pouring rain. And I've got I videotaped all of this stuff. So I sat there with it just pouring rain underneath the umbrella, eating a handmade pizza, just living it up. And then right when I was done eating the pizza, the rain goes away. So then I got told by the B&B I needed more euros for the traveler's tax. So I had to go convert. So I'm walk around. I was like, okay, the port's there. There's got to be an exchange over there. So I go to look across the street, like, between the cars. And if you've never been there, there's trying to cross a street out there is like, it's like a death sentence. There's so many cars traveling, and it's not like here in America where everybody stays in their lane. They have lanes, nobody uses them. That was a cultural shock there. So as I go to like look across the street, this motherfucker on a moped almost runs me over. So he slams on his brakes, and we look at each other and we're like, no fucking way. It was my buddy Christian Clay, who I just met before going to Italy, and we were doing DPs and stuff and boy girls together. So he's Italy's like top porn star. And so he doesn't live in Napoli. Like, he was just there to get insurance for a car that he just got. And so if I was 1 second too early or 1 second too late, I would have missed him. Like, we would have missed each other. So we're like, what the fuck? Like, I know Napoli is small, but this is ridiculous. So he takes me on an adventure all over Napoli. And then he ended up introducing me to a group of his friends, and we went to a pizza festival because Napoli's where the pizza was invented. So we went and had handmade margarita pizzas in Napoli. So it was the same thing that I programmed in the space. A surprise that I'd never expect coming, went on an adventure, and it was good. I mean, that's pretty vague, but that's pretty ridiculous, right? It's little insane. So another big one is I ran into this guy and girl like 3 times throughout my stay in like Lido di Asti in Rome. So we met in Lido di Ostia, but we just randomly happened to encounter each other in Rome and Lido di Ostia. Just not planned, it just kind of bumped into each other. Probability of that's pretty low. On my last night in Rome, or last night in Italy, I had to take a train to Rome and wait till the morning to take the train to the airport. So I was like, all right, well, I go to the quiet space and I say, I will find these 2 just to see if I could, it was just like, just to see if I could. So I started riding a scooter around, and then I ended up following my gut. My gut said, like, took me away from Rome, like literally away from Rome in a straight fucking line. And so I go, and like 2 or 3 miles away from Rome, I run into this, I guess we would call it a flea market. They call it something else, but it's just like 2 kilometers of just like vendors down the road. And I was like, oh, this is random. So I was like, cool. So I just started, I got off the scooter and I just started walking down, and I got to the very end and I ran into the guy and the girl.
No way.
And so I took photos, like I documented this whole thing. And so we couldn't believe it. Like, it was just insane. And so we ended up chit-chatting like the whole 9. So then I go back because I put my bag in one of those lockers thinking that it was a 24-hour locker because it was automatic. No, it closed from 11 to 6. And so I had to catch the train at 6:30 to get to the airport to make my flight. And my phone was about to die. And so my phone was like 5% battery when I get back, and it's 3 in the morning. There's nothing going on. It is a straight ghost town. And I was like, well, fuck, like, I'm screwed. I've got, 3.5 hours to kill. My phone is dead. I'd turn it off. Like, I could probably turn it back on and maybe GPS something, but I was like, the options are limited. So I go to the quiet place and I say, I will find a phone charger. So I started walking around, and I run into the only 2 Americans that I met on the journey. And they said that they don't have one, but I can talk to the hotel, like the the concierge at their hotel. I was like, great. So I go to talk to him and he says, no, we don't have any. We're not, we can't lend those out or anything like that. And then he just opens up a drawer and he goes, well, this isn't ours. So I guess you can use it. Just bring it back. Actually, in fact, there's a room right there. If you want to just like set up for a while, you can just hang out there. So I got my own room and I got a charger and I charged my phone till 6 o'clock where I went and picked up the bag and went to go home. But those are just some of them. Like that was the entire trip. I would go like another one. Like I had a friend come out to come stay with me and I didn't want to snore because the shifting diets. And so my nose was a bit off. So I wanted those nasal strips that open it. And so I asked her to bring them and she forgot. And I was like, that's okay. And I was looking at all the pharmacies that I was going through. And it's not like in America, we have options out the wazoo when it comes to finding stuff. Not all pharmacies carry everything. And so I'm looking at every pharmacy that I go to in each city that I go to, and I don't find them anywhere. So when she gets in, I was like, okay. So I go to that quiet space and I say, I will find these. And so I walk out. I was staying in Nettuno, which is a little bit south of Lido di Ostia, and inside of a castle, which was pretty cool. And I go out and I take a right and I just start walking around. My gut says turn around the other way. So I literally do a military about face and turn around and walk the other way. And within 5 minutes, I see the only guy that I've ever seen in Italy wearing one of those. So I was like, what? Where did you get that? Da, 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 da. And he's like, oh, I got this on Amazon. He's like, yeah, not all the pharmacies carry them, but actually, I think this one might. And turns out we're literally in front of a pharmacy. I was like, so I walk in there and sure enough, they had them. So I picked them up from there and I was like, what are the odds? So it's like one by itself, no, but like every time I'd go to that quiet space, it happened. But the way that I was manifesting it, I was manifesting through the lens of the experience, not through the lens of like getting it. I was manifesting it through the lens of the experience of finding it.
So basically, you found the cheat code to the Matrix. Like that's kind of what it's sounding like a little bit.
If that's the case,
Right.
yeah.
Well, it's very interesting because you're describing like just that ability to just be present, like to go to that quietness, and like you said, you've dealt with your mind always racing at all times, but now that to actually pause and hold that thought, and those doors open up, and it makes you wonder too, are these things and options always there, we just can't see them? And like maybe you can look at it both ways, right? Like that's nuts.
Well, so when you look through quantum mechanics, the future is quantitative predictive algorithms is essentially what they're kind of saying. That's what the future is, whereas the past is all the history based and the future is the quantitative prediction based off of the past. And so that's what it is, but it's your awareness actually changes it. So if everything's a frequency, your awareness and what you're resonating out there and how you're programming it can change the frequency of the path line that it goes. But like if you're going out there saying, oh, I'm going to be a millionaire, it's like the opportunities will present themselves, but if you don't know how to take advantage of those opportunities, you won't know how to take that path.
Right.
So it's like I've tried this with like certain connections with my businesses, and I would say like I need to meet someone that can help with this so that we can scale it to here. We can do this. Sure enough, I ended up meeting someone that has like started asking questions about it. And so once that conversation went going, it turns out, hey, like you can, like we actually end up doing business now because that was exactly what I was looking for. It's really bizarre. So it's like when it comes to manifesting, the code that I would suggest looking into is being present in the moment. And the reason for that is if this is a simulation, the false matrix is your mind. So any code you write in your mind is going into a mini game. It's not affecting the experience. So be in the present moment. The lens of this matrix is for experiences. So manifest through the lens of an experience. And you don't write it as a question. Would you write a computer program? Like if you're writing the code in a video game, are you going to write it as a question, or are you just going to say, this is what's going to happen? Like, this is it. You know, think of it as a computer program and write it that way. So that's how I would approach it.
This has been a ride, brother. This has been, Eric, do you have anything over there? As
Yeah,
we-
just real quick. I know it's hot. We're trying to wrap up. You said an example of observing your thoughts. Can you give an example of what that would look like? It's how do you know you're observing your thoughts or you're just not thinking?
It's a really good question. So, do you know that voice that's in your side your head? Like, if I say, "Don't think about the pink elephant," like
Yeah.
you're going to start thinking about the pink elephant, or like you're say you got plans or you're thinking about something to go do, and there's that voice that plays stuff out. Now, the only exception is that it's like 10 or 20% of the population don't have an inner dialogue, which that's
interesting.
oh, it's bizarre. There is some ancient texts that kind of you could very loosely translate them into why, but that's its own thing there. But like so if I ask you a question and you're thinking in your head like what are you going to say or how are you going to respond to that voice that you're talking about? y- th-
Yeah, man, it's so weird. Sometimes I can't tell if I'm having a voice or if it's just like a thought, but it's very blurry for me. But I obviously, yes.
Yeah.
Go on.
So like, do you have an inner voice? Because there's like 10 to 20% of the population that don't.
Well, I do catch myself talking to myself sometimes, but as far as an inner voice, I'm not sure.
Okay, so if you're talking to yourself in your mind, can you observe yourself talking to yourself?
Well, let's say I'm talking out loud, like I'm like, okay, we're gonna do this. So, I'm like trying to map out my plans. I can observe myself doing that for sure. But I wouldn't say that is me being present though.
Well, yeah, because you're in your mind.
Right.
So if you are in your, so here's the thing is if you're in your mind, 90% of your thought processes are not actionable. But if you're in the present moment, 90% of your thought processes are actionable. Because if you're in the present moment and there's nothing to be done, there's no thoughts to be had. That's why extreme sports, that's like you're in the present moment because you're trying to stay alive, basically. So if you're in your mind, you're thinking, but if you become aware of your thoughts that are thinking, then you're not your thoughts.
Right.
So that's what sets you on that pathway. So if I can observe myself thinking, like if I'm not first person thinking, but if I can step back and I can observe myself thinking, then who's the observer? Another way to look at this is like if I look at you and then point to this and point to that and point around and I'm saying water bottle plant picture, water bottle plant picture, I'm starting to process things that are out here, but my eyes and focus are here, but there's something that is shifting focus to process the information around. That's the observer. Who's the person, who's the observer of that? So these are all the things that are going to try to, like, when you start to answering that, it's going to take you on that pathway to identify your relationship with your higher self.
So are you able to do that on command, like present yourself? That's pretty sweet.
A lot of times they say that's the purpose of meditation, is to be present and in the moment. But how do you explain that to someone who's never been that before? So the easiest way would be from Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, was ask yourself, what is my next thought? In that period of nothingness happening, your brain shifted from the mind to the present. So if you can identify that shift, and it's really, really subtle, but if you can do that over and over and over and become very, very familiar with that switch, then practice your meditation by going into the present moment doing that. And that's the beginning of the journey.
Cool. Well, that's a lot for me to grasp, but I'm gonna work on it. Thank you again for coming on. From my point of view.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Great conversations.
Oh, and this is, I mean, I would love to continue this in future segments because there's so many other things. Like, I feel like you're like a human chat GPT in a way. Like you're just like your knowledge and how quickly you're very good at articulating too, like describing things that are very hard to describe. So a lot of, as you were talking, I was with you I was hanging on, but I'm like, oh no, the way he words that actually makes a lot of sense. It's hard to put these things.
It's a lot of information.
I mean, you have me thinking just about the thing you said at the beginning of the conversation, how language was actually meant as like kind of a distraction, if I'm interpreting right, when we had telepathic skills. Because you're right, it adds another barrier of confusion where if you know telepathy, it's just like, well, we don't need the language.
So here's the real quick. I'll just summarize this up.
Good.
So like, because we're talking a lot about Enlil and Enki and all that. So if Enki made us to be like all connected, one consciousness, we have your individual and collective consciousness. Yeah, you would scale technologically super fast and could be perceived as a threat, which is how Enlil saw it. So if you're going to basically break that down, he said mankind will live no longer than 120, and that mankind will be made to forget. Well, obviously he had to do something with the genetics to make it so the brain would delete those synapses of hyperconnectivity. And I believe that's also where he put in the concept of the mind. So the mind was actually the prison where you're also the prisoner, but you're also the warden locking yourself in.
Yeah.
So from that point on, that's why all of the spiritual gurus throughout history would always say, if you want to escape this reality or find divinity or go to heaven, look inward and remember your divinity, because divinity is not bound by time. Your higher self is not bound by the time that we experience. So yeah. So there's multiple layers of it. It's your conscious mind being trapped in this cycle of life, but there's also the part that's the experience, and you're here, the ultimate purpose is for the experience. Otherwise, how can you justify bad things happening and good things happening and all this kind of stuff? It's to experience in everything, anything and everything. That's the purpose of consciousness. So that justifies the whole thing.
Well, and you really got me thinking too, like, because I had known of soul contracts, but making that decision to enter the matrix. But what the cherry on top you gave to me is like, no, these people you have soul ties to, you guys actually all decide, hey, let's go do this. Let's go to this planet. Let's get in these human bodies and let's try this out for this run, you know?
So I don't tell a whole lot of people this, but I remember a lot that happened before coming into this world. And one of my really close friends, we remember shifting awareness to each other and saying it's time to return to Earth, and bam, we woke up. That came in pretty clear and pretty vivid. And, for a couple months after that, we started remembering a lot of like past lives and the worlds in between and stuff like that. And since I was a little kid, at 6 years old, I remember my third eye had opened as a kid, and I started remembering things. And so I started doing energy work, and I could see people's auras and colors and all that kind of stuff. And that's what led into becoming a research subject for the theta brainwave. And so from there, I was in a bunch of tests and double blind tests and all this kind of stuff. And this is like the tip of the iceberg. And so after we're done recording, I'll show you a couple of them.
So before I give you the last word and we get out of here, I have to ask this one question. Of course, I would love to dive into the origins of Jesus. We'll have to save that for part 2, because that we could talk an hour on that one. But I'm just curious, what do you have a mission like for you? Because you're just someone that you've done so many different things. You're so versed and experienced in so many different areas. I guess what I'm trying to say, like, for your mission or purpose here, do you have like a mantra, or is it kind of like, hey, I'm just staying present and just going as time goes type of thing?
If I were to have a mission, I would say it would be to start bringing awareness to the unaware. If this is a simulation and this is a matrix, then we need to start thinking like it, and then think in the terms of experiences. So how many of us and how many of our parents are repeating the same cycle over and over and over again and not deviating? And if the purpose is experience, what new experience are you gaining? And so I would look at it from that.
I dig that, man. Yeah. Well, this has been a phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. This is just part 1, because we're going to have a whole Will Pounder playlist after this. This has been great, man. If people want to find you, get a hold of you, anywhere online people should go?
I mean, I'm only online for my adult stuff. Perhaps I'll do something, like I'll create something later for everything else, because the adult chapter is coming to an end.
Yeah.
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 It served its purpose.
Yeah. Just a chapter in the book, right?
Yeah. Weirdly enough, the way I even entered the industry was bizarre. Like I lost a bet filming a TV show. By losing the bet, a porn star was a guest instructor or a guest on a guest for a couple episodes. She wanted to shoot with me. I said no, it'd mess with my acting career. So she was like, well, let's make a bet. And so I was being a smart ass, and I said, well, I've got to go shoot a commercial and then fly back and play Captain America at Comic-Con. I was like, if they both cancel, sure, because I got nothing else to do, and they booked around the schedule. So I'd like intentionally threw that out into the universe. And then 9 a.m. on the dot, my agent called me and says, hey, I got bad news. They both canceled. And so I was like, shut the fuck up. So I went because I'm always man of my word. And so I went and I shot a content scene with her, and she's like, oh, well, you're good. We should go get you an agent. So I go get an agent, go do that. And then when I go shoot my first like professional scene, I thought it was a prank because on the TV show, I was pranking everybody. We're all military veterans. So there's no line you can't cross. And I'm very creative. And sometimes these pranks would go viral and did well for the show. And sometimes I just do them just for the sake of doing a prank and having some good laughs. And I thought this was the guys getting back at me because my experience in film was you do a scene and you shoot it multiple times, sometimes 30, 40 times, you'll shoot the same scene. So I go to my first porn set and it was, I just regurgitate the lines. Like I didn't act it. It was just like, okay, I got the dialogue. He still got to do the lighting and the blocking. So I was like, okay, so I just regurgitate it, but he was rolling and he's like, oh, wow, that was really good. I was like, what? So we go to the next one. He says, oh, you're like a one-hit natural. And so I just got the vibe that he was just blowing smoke up my ass the whole time. And then that's when it dawned on me. I was like, this is a prank. And I was like, okay, well, if I was the one throwing this prank, I would come out with the cameras when I whip it out. And then I was like, fuck, I can't whip out a little guy. Like I'll never hear it, the end of it, you know? So I was like, got my hand in my pocket and I was like trying to wake him up because I'm like, I can't, like, I don't want to have to deal with that, you know, bullshit from the guys. And so she's, you know, she's down and she's undoing the belt. And in my video, you can kind of see me shifting from left to right. So like they're going to come through here. They're going to come from the stairs. And then sure enough, she whips it out and goes, Gluck, Gluck 3000. I was like, shit, there's a fucking porno. And I was like, well, it's already hard. So I was like, well, fuck it, let's go. So I was in the Marine Corps, so I did what we do best. And then ended up winning awards and kind of been in ever since.
Rest is history,
But
right?
yeah.
And thank you for your service, by the way.
Thanks for the support.
Yeah, man. No, I really, no, you're really interesting, dude. Like when we first met, it's like, you know, when I meet people randomly, like, you know, like, oh yeah, I can talk to him for an hour and a half. But like with you, it's like, no, we need like 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, there's
so many
still,
topics and
broke
things.
my back in the military, figured out how to
Yeah.
fix it, created my own job in the Marine Corps.
We came out with a bang with this one. This is a lot of great material. So Will, thank you so much for coming on. I always give the guests the last word.
Oh.
How would you like to end this podcast?
I would say if you've taken anything out of this podcast is the purpose of this life is the experience. And so start identifying self by looking in and becoming aware of the person talking in your head and just start that journey. Because no matter where you go with that journey, you're going to land in a better spot.
Well said. Will, thank you so much. Hey everyone, thanks for watching the Sam Dever podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@thesamdever podcast, and give us a follow on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. See you soon.